Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. We've dedicated this podcast to exploring the idea of doing business and living life, which is not part of the title, but you'll get if you live your business with a servant's heart, your life will follow the same. But how to learn to do that, to change and impact your world, impact the people around you. Approach that idea and things will change. We also developed this podcast so my guests can motivate you, inspire you, and educate you in so many ways that you want to go out and do that. Your call to action today is the audience. Yeah, I'm going to give you guys some homework. We're going to talk about learning today, so got to follow up with the homework. I want you to think about how you're going to serve yourself and others today and what impact you create today. Keywords today. I talked to a lot of people. Hey, I forgot. I'll start next week, like we do with a lot of things. But I'll tell you what, you start today. I get to do this daily. I'm doing it today with this incredible guest to be able to give gifts of service. Start doing that. I know you're going to be smiling and you'll be very happy. And today's episode is sponsored by an incredible sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Join a community of high-income entrepreneurs and business leaders to create a world-changing thought leader platform to grow your business. For more information, reach out and I'll get you all the information. So let's get into the show because you guys are going to be fired up. Take a pad and paper, or I use an iPad, whatever you do, because we're going to talk about impact and difference with AI and learning. And as I told my guests before the show, if our employees and people around us are smarter, we are smarter. So with that being said, Luis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Steve.
So why did you delve into the AI and education/learning space?
Well, Steve, I've actually been in education for over 2 decades now. And my career, actually, I got into education by accident, although I always was a lover of education and come from a family that really value education. And but I started as an engineer and a software engineer, and back in the 90s. And back then, believe it or not, we went at the beginning of the 2000s into a drought in technology. It's kind of hard to think about that today, but it did happen back then, because back then only technology companies were technology companies, and today any company is a technology company. But if there was a squeeze into the job market, there was not a lot of places for you to go. And so back then, when I was part of the .com boom and bust and all that. So when the bust happened, and I ended up being hired by one of my alma maters, Full Sail University, to create an online university for them. And lucky for me, they thought doing that was creating a website, which I was really good at. And so I took the job, and that's how I got to education. And it so happened that we end up building one of the fastest growing online universities in the country, that went from 0 students to 5,000 students in a couple of years. And this is only significant because the university took them 30 years to get to that number. And we did that in a couple of years online. And then 3 years later, we were at 12,000 and had generated 1,000 jobs, and launched more than 35 degree programs. And the online university was generating, over $100 million annually. And so that's how I got to education. But it also made me very aware of the challenges of digital education. And as we went along, and I learned more, digital education solved a very big problem, which is access, right? We can get to more people when you break when you break the time and space,
Yeah.
but also brought some problems on their own, and that didn't exist before, which is first that um, the content is a lot harder to produce. And the way I explain this to people is that if you're sitting in a classroom with a good expert that also happens to be a good communicator, you feel educated. And but once you remove that person out of the equation, then the education materials, what you used to usually see behind that person, those are doing the teaching, and those materials have to be effective, and that's actually really difficult to do. And so that's one problem that became very aware. I had to create a whole department for content creators, instructional designers, and also on and so forth, videographers, audio people, script writers. And the other problem is that was not new, but digital education didn't really solve it, was what we call in education assessment, evaluation of learning. How do we know the learner learned? And it's been a very difficult problem over the decades because it's very hard to do. And unless you can engage the learner one-on-one into deep conversation and practice, it's really hard to evaluate the mastery, to evaluate the knowledge. Tests fall really, really short. And research shows that tests are at best mediocre at assessing learning. And so that was a very big problem to solve, that until we had this new generation of AI, wasn't really a way to solve it. So I learned that I left the university after 19 years to go back to technology and startups, like at the beginning of my career. And those two problems really were problems that were very exciting to address with this new generation of artificial intelligence. And that's how PEAT was born, with my co-founder, which came from Orlando-based unicorn, the only Orlando-based unicorn, a fintech company called Stacks. They grew a lot in the last couple of years, acquiring companies and new employees. And he's like, we need to create an academy to teach these people to integrating into the company. So he took it upon himself to do that. And then he ran into the problem that I already knew, which is it's really hard to do. And he said he thought it was going to be a couple hundred hours, ended up being thousands of hours, and a new department created. So when he exited that company, he said, there gotta be a better way to do this. We got together and we started PEAT.
There it goes. And you said a lot of great points there, but I want to highlight one thing you said. Every company is a technology company. Audience, what he's saying is you're using technology. You could be a plumber in the down, neighborhood plumber, or you could be a top company. Technology's here to stay. And if you're not embracing it, there's going to be problems. It's going to be very hard for you to do things. Talk about PEAT. What's it stand for? I know it's not an AI PEAT, but there's an acronym to that. And what's your mission with PEAT?
Yeah, so PEAT stands for personalized education, training, and enrichment. That portion of personalized education is a lot where we focus. How do we personalize education? Because when you personalize education, you can really get higher engagement from the learner, and that becomes better learning, and you can do a lot of great things. And so that's what it stands for. And what we try to do is to bring the power of workforce learning and power of learning into smaller and medium-sized businesses. In my experience, where companies are large, when they get there, when they get to be successful and have thousands of employees and millions of dollars of revenue, then they can do what I did at the university. Oh yeah, I'll just hire a department, right? I hire a learning manager and people under that department, and they have money to spend, and they run, I've seen learning departments be in the low end at $500,000 a year, in the high end a couple $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And but a company that has 100 employees, 200 employees, they cannot spend that. And but training is important. It's a superpower. Usually, the way they solve it is to say, okay, they take the experts and the leaders, and they try to turn them into trainers. But the training portion is just a piece of it. You gotta create the materials, you gotta deliver the training, you gotta track it, and you have to evaluate the learning. So we created a tool that is very effective for that group of companies, which is hundreds of thousands of companies in the United States and the world, that are in that median state of hundreds of employees to 1,000 employees, where they can invest in training, but they cannot invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in training. So we are a tool specifically for them.
Yeah, and a price point where they can afford it. Talk about the culture of a company and when they are better learners. They're smarter. Let's just be ground level. They're smarter employees. How does that affect the culture of the business?
We usually talk about effective learning being a superpower. We separate the training from effective training, and because folks sometimes they write a bunch of procedures given to people, and then expect that they learn that, and that's not effective training. And but when you are lucky to have effective training, so your employees feel more empowered, and will translate into better customer service for your customers. They also tend to stay with you. And 90% of the companies in the United States use training as a means of retention of talent. 90%. This is really, really high.
Jeez.
And so it just makes a good business sense. But sometimes it's very expensive for companies. Not everybody have $500,000 to spare and absorb more new employees and things like that. So we're a fraction of that. We are less than half of hiring one person to do your training, and one person cannot do all your training, believe me.
Right.
But to answer your question, it just makes business sense. It makes the business a lot better.
Interesting. We're talking today because this last night we went out to dinner, me and my wife, and we talked to one of the employees, and he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have the training. You could tell, and he almost said, "I'm new," or which you kind of figure I don't need to say it. But if that company had training, that guy would come in and this, and let me get you. And I want you to talk about. There are a lot of young people listen to this. How important is a young person in their 20s that's educated in the company, not just school educated, but they're educated in the company, and the one that's not, and how much better of an employee is the A compared to B?
It's you mentioned in your example from last night, for example, and as a traditional solution to that would be shadowing, right? You take the new person and you have the shadow a person with more experience. And it's a good solution, very cost effective. And here's the challenge with it. They'll pick up the good habits, and they also pick up the bad habits. So now you're amplifying the bad habits of the person, and I'm bringing their own tool set of bad habits. And you need training to be formalized to make sure everybody understands the same things, that they all have the same language, and they all have the same knowledge, so that you can move forward into more complex things, into better problem solving. So an employee that is trained versus an employee that is not trained is abysmal difference in terms of the productivity and the happiness that they can have in their job.
And you nailed it. I love what you're doing. You're making company, you have a solution. If you're out to have a company, make sure you have a solution, whether it's this or that. This is the solution, because it is a problem. We've all been to a business. My wife talked about a story at another company she went to. I won't say the name, where the customer service sucked. The guy said the upward 3 times to her, which if you have training, all that. So I want to dive in, kind of your secret sauce. How does PEAT use AI to enhance the learning?
So we have a proprietary algorithm that ingests the existing knowledge of the company. Many times processes have already been written out, or at the very least they have had a person deliver a training over Zoom and as an expert, which an expert is not the same as a trainer, and but many times they can be a trainer, and we take all the information that we can get, and then work with our customers to create series of courses to deliver the knowledge that the employees need. And sometimes they usually start with onboarding. Onboarding is something that touches every employee. So a lot of times they would just want to standardize their onboarding so everybody knows their policies, their history, their customers, their industry, all those things. But then we can go deeper. Once they have that, they can go deeper. And so we do 3 things very well. Number 1, we create content very effectively, very quick. Okay, so we estimate about 20 to 20 times faster than traditional methods. And Then the second thing that we do very well is that we have a proprietary tool for simulations that can act as an expert, it can act as an instructor, it can act as a process, it can act as a customer, and so that the learner can practice and do the evaluation of learning in a personalized way. And for example, we have the major soccer team here in Orlando, Florida, as our customer, and the stadium for the Orlando Magic is also our customer. They game day employees get little training because they're not a full time. They only come for the event, right? But they also, are very customer facing. So they get to train them into the safety, into the stadium, into the processes of security, into all of those things. And they get to practices, and we log those conversations. They get to see them do additional coaching. So that is something really that we do really well. The third thing that we do is the customer service part of it. Now, I love that your show is so people oriented, because we are like that as well. We believe that software companies today go out of their way not to talk to people. And if you want the software, you go over here, create an account, and put your credit card, and never talk to anybody. If you have a problem, please write me over here. You never talk to anybody. Our customer success team is shoulder to shoulder with our customers. Our contract requires that we co-create the courses with them. The first 3 courses, the first 5 courses, they need to, so that they are really well versed in the platform, but also the AI is properly trained, including the voices of the experts that we synthesize, so we can deliver with audio without having to burden the expert of hours and hours of recording. And then after we do that co-creation, we stay with the customer, checking on them with every month with meetings, face to face, to make sure they are successful. So the combination of the 3 is in our good, very accessible pricing is really what makes us special.
The fourth pillar too, that you probably know, but I'm going to tell the audience, is you bring love to a business. Because I think a smarter employee loves their place being there. They love on the customer better because they know more. Let me help you be a servant's heart, because I've learned this because of what Luis has taught me in his program. I can do it. And that's what I love, because that's a true servant's heart, building through it. What are some of the challenges? Let's ask this question, because I'm curious. So I come on board to the Orlando Magic. I become an employee. Am I doing computer training, on-site training, or is it a combination of both or all?
So the tool by default creates what is called a self-paced courses, which are courses that are meant for you to take on your own. And usually the problem with the self-paced courses is that they are really good at getting to people, but really bad at evaluating the learning, and because you're never speaking to anybody. So with the simulation engine, we really make the self-serve and then the self-paced courses a lot more effective. And now, some folks like to then complement the self-serving courses with face-to-face sessions, and but then in those sessions, instead of being covering policies and processes, they can be doing mentoring and coaching and adding the heart to what they do. And so we tell our customers, let us do the brain so you can do the heart.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is it's customizable. You work with the Orlando Magic, which is an NBA team. You could do the same thing with a plumbing company that has 100 employees. You just customize it depending on what their mission is and what they do, right?
That's right. So we have customers in sports, in law firms, logistic company, fintech. Recently, we got a university by using it for staff training, and to train them in policies for financial aid. And so really the platform doesn't really care.
So you're a servant's heart in every industry, and I love it. By the way, audience, fintech is financial technology companies. I know sometimes people reach out when they say, I always like to make sure people know. Okay, this has been awesome. I'm fired up right now. I want to learn more about what you do, but with everything, there's challenges. What's the challenge with people taking on PEAT?
The challenge is that sometimes the pricing it can be a challenge for them. They don't expect to be paying. Our contracts usually center around $15,000 to $18,000 a year, and so they think about, well, I mean, that's a $1,500 a month. That seems like a lot of money, and but the way we sell to them, it's like, yeah, but you couldn't hire one person for that, and one person could not deliver all your training, and so getting over that calculation in their mind, it's like, well, I can just ask the people to shadow each other, I continue to do it the way we're doing it, and but I usually tell them, well, then you wouldn't be speaking to me, and if you were doing that, you obviously think that this is a problem in your organization. So that part can be a challenge. The other one is finding the time to work with our team to get things created. Yes, there's a lot of automation. Yes, it will do the work really fast and very effective, but you still have to work. You still have to you still have to approve it. You still have to read it. You still have to make sure that is what you want. And so you're not gonna push a button and then give you hundreds of courses with everything that is in your mind that you thought you needed and you thought you didn't need. You still need to work with it. And there's a lot of humanity in using AI effectively.
Yeah, and
finding the time.
Yeah, and that's time, but this is time because ROI, that's the elephant in every room of business. You don't make money, you don't make money, I don't make money. We're going to go out of business.
Yes.
18,000, $1 million revenue company is very little.
Yes.
Because if you take that from $1 million to $1.5 million, let's say, which is probably much bigger, your 18,000 just meant your $500,000. I think everybody listening to that, you raise your hand going, I'll take 18,000 or 500,000 all day, or whatever that is, increase too. But again, it's culture. You change the culture, that increases the ROI and keeping employees, and we, on and on and on. The last question, we'll get to the end here, and I'd love to bring you back for part 2 because this is it's needed because everybody's a tech company. What's one tip you'd give somebody for AI? It's a Wild Wild West right now. You know that, I know that. But what's one tip you give people if they're going to use an AI tool like PEAT?
I think it's important to be, if you are a knowledge worker today, and even if you're not a knowledge worker, I think that is imperative that you have access to an AI tool for your day-to-day life. Don't wait for the world to tell you how the tool is going to be used. Be part of the change. And if you're a knowledge worker, I think you have no choice. It's like if you were in the 90s fighting to do email. And you should not be fighting it. You should be embracing it. And in my case, when I started, I've been in technology for a very long time, so I'm very used to trying new things. But even for me, I forced myself. I bought a subscription to ChatGPT, and so that I will force myself to use it every single day. So you should try to find ways to use a tool like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Perplexity, or something like that on a daily basis. And that will then open your mind into how can I bring this to my business? Because the question is not whether or not AI will get into your industry. The question is how, and because it's going to happen, and you don't want it to happen and take you by surprise. You have to embrace it, use it, and then be a leader, a pioneer. So my request for people to start using it, and if you're already using it, then it will give you the intelligence to know what's a good tool versus what's not a good tool, and what really is applicable to what you do. And 2 words that I like to tell everybody that is using these AI tools is all about source and refinement. And that requires your human part, your side, your creativity. Where do you find the source? Knowing what you want and be able to refine that to the output that you want. And that applies to all AI tools.
That's one of the best tips of AI I've heard in a long time. And you add the human part, which people are afraid of. It's AI won't take over humans. It just won't. It may delve into it a little bit. And it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking back in websites when people didn't have websites, and the people that did took off because they had the landscape and the internet. That's what AI is. What you're saying is so awesome. Well, great show. My God, I'm so fired up. I want to end with some fun. I got a little improv. So I've got a reservation at a restaurant for you, Luis. Table of 4, you're going to sit obviously in one of the chairs. In the other 3 empty chairs, who would you invite, dead or alive? Why are they going to be invited to the table? And I think most important, what food would you order for the table?
So the food is easy because I think that if you want meaningful interaction of people at a table, you have to order tapas style. So I'm a big fan of always only ordering appetizers.
Yep.
And just do appetizers, keep them coming, and getting everybody to share. And you take the last one, I'll take the last. And all that is an interaction that is very human, and I love it. In terms of who else do I invite, definitely. I mean, my father passed away many years ago. So if I can choose from the dead, most definitely my father would love it to be in that chair. And the other 2, I love to rescue friendships that I left behind, and I invite them over as well. So think about a couple of friends that I have not heard of or talked to in more than a decade. Find them and put them in that table.
That's a great table. You definitely have a big heart. I really appreciate that. Again, thank you so much, Luis, for taking the time, being a wonderful guest. How can our audience connect with you? I know people are listening going, I got to connect with Luis.
Well, we have the easiest domain there is, and it's PETE.com, PEAT.com, and /podcast. So I know that it came from here. And you go there and you read and what we do, and if that gets you excited, then fill up our form and we'll call you right back, and hopefully we are a fit for your organization.
That's a perfect AI guy. See how simple he made it? Super simple. When you do tech, if it's difficult or complex, get out. It's got to be simple for you to use or you'll never use it. Audience, your call to action at the end here is it's so important. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Not way you think, I say this all the time, I'm going to repeat myself. I think podcast links and podcast shows are a gift. And here's an example, Luis. You have a company or a friend has a company that's struggling with learning. They tell you, man, I have all this training. Nobody's following the rules, this and that. Well, you listen to Luis's podcast, give it that link to him through the subscribe. Send that link to him. Go, hey, I just listened to this incredible guy. He uses AI learning for businesses. I think it would help you. Let's walk that quick journey. They listen, go, I got to reach out. They reach out on the link, fill the format, and Luis starts working with them. Guess what? They start growing. You just gave somebody a gift. Yeah, did you make money? Forget about the money. Let's transform people. It's not transactional people. And that's what you can do with the link. So go ahead and do that. Subscribe to the channel, share these links. That's what they're there for. Me and Luis also would love for you to comment on the YouTube channel. If it's information for Luis, I will get it to him. If it's a critique of the podcast, we want this to be the best podcast to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you. With that being said, me and Luis want to thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And we'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.